My name is Clara, and for 25 years, I lived in a mansion built on shadows. My parents curated a life of impossible luxury, draped in designer silk and polished by the envy of everyone in our elite social circle. I was the silent observer of their golden world, always kept at a careful, cold distance. They rarely spoke to me, and when they did, it was usually to command me to sign another document, verify a mysterious bank transfer, or provide a biometric scan for a private vault. I thought it was simple parental control, but the truth was far more sinister. I was never truly their daughter. I was the human safety deposit box for their stolen empire. Every cent of their opulent lifestyle, every charitable donation they made to mask their tracks, was routed through accounts legally tethered to my existence. I was the living vault for their stolen millions, a pawn designed to protect their legacy at the cost of my autonomy. But they made a fatal error. They assumed I was just a blind vessel, never realizing that as the vault, I was the only one who held the master key. Living in our estate was like starring in a film where the script was never shared with me. Our home was a sprawling, marble-floored fortress of status, filled with the hum of expensive machinery and the sterile scent of fresh lilies. My parents moved through these rooms with a practiced, performative grace. Always hosting galas or attending high-profile charity auctions, they were masters of the public narrative, portraying the image of a selfless, philanthropic family. Yet, behind the velvet curtains and the reinforced mahogany doors, the silence was absolute. My existence was reduced to a transactional necessity. They didn't want my conversation, my laughter, or my dreams. They wanted my thumbprint, my digital verification, and my signature. I lived in a mansion, but I was a prisoner with a signing pen. I spent my days in the West Wing, a beautiful, gilded cell where every digital tablet and legal file was waiting for me. My mother would enter, only to check if I had completed the day's authorization tasks, her eyes cold, looking right through me as if I were a piece of furniture that required occasional maintenance. The wealth that supposedly defined our family was never meant to be mine. It was a phantom fortune I was forced to sustain while being kept on a starvation diet of genuine affection. I watched my father's empire grow, an abstract beast fed by my compliance, while I slowly withered in the suffocating comfort of their secrets. Every piece of jewelry I wore felt like a shackle, and every expensive dinner was a bitter reminder that I was merely the custodian of their elaborate, stolen prosperity. The end of my innocence arrived on a Tuesday, delivered via an unsecured digital memo left open on my father's tablet. I had been tasked with authorizing a standard quarterly audit, but instead, I stumbled into a private portal titled Final Asset Liquidation. My pulse stalled as I scrolled through the legalese. They weren't planning a simple transfer. They were crafting my erasure. By the month's end, my parents intended to file a fraudulent declaration of my legal incapacity, followed by an immediate, permanent relocation to an offshore medical facility under a shell company's care. In the eyes of the law, I would effectively cease to exist as a conscious person. Once they secured power of attorney, they would drain every cent tied to my biometric signature into a complex network of untraceable, international accounts. I realized then that my parents didn't see me as their child, but as an aging security flaw that needed to be patched. They had decided that my utility had reached its expiration date. I stared at the screen, the cursor blinking like a countdown to my own social and financial death, and felt my fear harden into a cold, lethal resolve. The weeks leading to my planned demise became a high-stakes performance of domestic normalcy. During the day, I sipped tea with my mother, discussing the upcoming gala's flower arrangements while my mind traced the digital arteries of our wealth. At night, I retreated to my room, the blue light of my hidden laptop illuminating the quiet fury on my face. Because I was the biometric key to their empire, the encryption layers protecting their offshore accounts were inherently tied to my fingerprints and facial recognition. I didn't need to be a professional hacker. I simply needed to be myself. I meticulously redirected the flow of capital, creating a complex series of digital dead ends that masked my activity from their internal surveillance. I was essentially siphoning their empire into a private, untraceable trust that legally belonged to me, the living vault. The tension was a physical weight, thick and suffocating. My father would often walk into my office to check the status of a transfer, his eyes scanning the room with the casual indifference of a man counting his livestock. Each time I would calmly tilt my screen, my hands steady and my voice devoid of tremor, feeding him the exact lies he expected to hear. I watched him drink his scotch, oblivious to the fact that his glass was already empty, his financial security already a phantom. I was liquidating their future, transaction by transaction, while they were busy planning my funeral. I saw the arrogance in their smiles, the way they looked at me with pity, and it only fueled the fire in my veins. Every time I hit execute, I felt a surge of adrenaline that rivaled the fear. I was becoming the architect of their sudden, inevitable poverty, systematically dismantling their power while sitting at their dinner table, passing the salt, and playing the role of the oblivious, obedient child. The grand chandelier above the ballroom shimmered with a cold, unforgiving light as my parents stood at the dais, their glasses raised in a toast to a future of unparalleled expansion, stepped onto the platform, my footsteps silent against the polished marble. The crowd, an assembly of the city's most influential figures, fell into a confused hush. My father's hand froze midair, a flash of irritation crossing his face, while my mother's smile became a fragile, painted mask. I took the microphone, the feedback whine cutting through the room like a jagged blade, and ignored their frantic, hushed commands for me to step down. I didn't need to shout. The silence I had cultivated was loud enough to drown out their arrogance. I tapped a few keys on the console connected to the main screen, and suddenly, the room was bathed in the stark, unforgiving light of a financial audit. Every offshore account, every shell company, and every transaction that had fueled their opulence was now displayed in high definition, trailing directly back to their personal, unverified signatures. "The vault has been emptied," I declared, my voice steady, echoing off the high ceilings. "For 25 years you used my name as a shield for your theft. You treated me like a safety deposit box, assuming I would never dare to open the lock." I held up the final deed of transfer, signed, stamped, and legally binding, a document that effectively funneled the entirety of their fortune into a private, independent account that was now locked away from their reach. I saw the color vanish from my father's face, leaving him a ghost of the man who had commanded rooms just moments prior. My mother's glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the stage, the chime of crystal punctuating the absolute, devastating finality of their ruin. They weren't just poor, they were exposed, and the empire they had built on my existence had just been legally demolished in front of the only people whose respect they desperately craved. Within hours, the gala morphed into a theater of clinical, bureaucratic destruction. Federal auditors and local authorities arrived before the champagne glasses were even collected, serving immediate seizure warrants as my parents' primary accounts were frozen in real time. The opulent ballroom, which had been the pinnacle of their social authority, became a holding cell for their collapse. My father's frantic shouting was silenced by the steady, rhythmic clicking of handcuffs, while my mother sat on the edge of a velvet chair, staring at the empty air as if she could still conjure the millions I had reclaimed. They had spent 25 years manufacturing a throne out of stolen paper, and in one evening it had turned to ash. I simply turned away, my silhouette vanishing into the cold, midnight mist, leaving them to face the hollow, echoing ruins of the empire they had tried to steal from me. They tried to write me out of existence, so I erased their entire fortune instead. Silence is not weakness. It is the ultimate strategy. If you have ever been cast aside by those who thought they owned you, remember, you might be the biggest threat to their lies. Subscribe to Void Revenge Tales to reclaim your own narrative. Your truth is your power. Don't let anyone else write your ending. Tell me your story in the comments. I am listening.